All right. So thank you all so much for joining us. This was this Ask the Dietitian session was something Scott and I have talked about for a while. Uh, so many people have questions about nutrition. There's so much misinformation out there, or just information that, sometimes is just missing context. What might be appropriate for one person may not be appropriate for the next. And so the idea here was really just to give people from all four of our gyms the chance to, we have a brilliant dietitian on the staff, and it's like, well, let's take advantage of that. And so here's a chance to get your questions answered, again, because a lot of times context can really help. Because again, something might be appropriate for one person, it might not be appropriate for someone else. So how this is going to work, I've got 10 different questions that people submitted me in advance. They sent in. We're going to go through those. I don't expect it to take too long, and we might, ask Scott some follow-up questions, just a little dig a little deeper on that, and then we'll open it up. And if anyone has anything else they want to know, or maybe you want to revisit one of the questions that was asked earlier, you're more than welcome to do so. So, all right, Scott, are we all on high alert and ready to go?
Ready to go.
All right, here we go. I love it. I love being on the end of the fire in the questions, not the receiving end. So, all right, first question for you, Scott. Denise sent this question in. Can having too much protein in your diet affect losing weight while working out 3 days a week? And second part to that, are there any specific dietary suggestions you would provide if being treated for high blood pressure? So let's talk about that first one first. Can too much protein affect losing weight?
It generally is going to negatively impact or negatively affect losing weight. So it's really, really hard for most people to overconsume on protein. Most people fall well short of just their recommended amount in general. And to really overconsume, if I'm understanding the question correctly,
Mhm.
um, to overconsume on protein, you really have to gotta make it a huge priority and eat gobs and gobs of protein. So the general recommendation for protein for just an average healthy adult is zero point 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. Um, that's really kind of the in basement. So that's like a bare minimum. People who are actively losing weight and people who are strength training on a regular basis both need a higher amount of protein. Couple those two factors together, basically you should be eating well north of that. Um, so really taking a step back, the only way that any calories from any source, whether it be protein, carbohydrates, fat, alcohol, the only way that those ever get stored as fat in our bodies is when we are just over consuming in general. So you have kind of a maintenance level of calories. Let's just call it 1,800 calories per day to maintain your weight. If you're in excess of that, so if you even if it's coming from all good whole food sources, lots of good lean proteins and everything, if you're in surplus, you're going to be storing a little bit of fat. Um, but it's really hard for your body to take protein and turn it into fat. It's much easier to do with other sources like carbohydrates. So um, generally, the more protein, the better. As long as the total calories are in check, there's really going to be no issue there.
Okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, as far as losing weight, at the end of the day, it's not really about protein, it's about calories in versus calories out. Is that accurate?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then going back to the protein, what would you say would be on that higher end of like, hey, anything beyond this? Again, even though, as you said, and I would agree, it is rare or hard to do, what would be that like top end of the scale?
For the population that we work with, taking the outliers of like elite athletes and bodybuilders and stuff like that out of the equation, it's probably 2 grams per kilo. Um, for most people, that's really going to be almost unattainable. So I don't think it's probably a concern.
Okay. So for those of you that aren't math's not your specialty. Remember kilograms, pounds, take your body weight divided by 2.2. So there's your kilograms. So take that number, then, multiply it times two is kind of your high end there. So, okay. All right. And then what about any specific dietary restrictions or suggestions? Sorry, if being treated for high blood pressure. Is that something that do you need more context, or can you, is
Just
there a short answer there?
yeah, the DASH diet generally it's been around forever. It's a good go-to. In essence, really all that means is eating lots of lean proteins, good quality whole grains, lots of fruits, veggies, staying hydrated. All of those things do help lower blood pressure in individuals with hypertension. Um, Part of the reason it works is if you're eating those foods, you're probably not eating a whole lot of processed junk. So those foods are going to tend to be a little bit lower in sodium, lower in fat, bad fats, refined sugars, all that kind of stuff.
Okay, cool. Awesome. All right, let's talk about meal planning or making meal choices in restaurants. We all like to go out to eat, so I think this is a great question. What would you say is the most important thing to consider? The calories, the carbs, proteins, fats, or something else?
Yeah, I like this question. Again, at the end of the day, it comes down to calories in versus calories out. So if I'm trying to remember exactly, I think if it's a chain and it has more than 10, 15 locations or so, they're required to list nutrition facts, calories, fat, protein, carbs, all that kind of stuff. So that can help if you're eating at a place that has that information available. You could also do a little bit of research ahead of time and uh, check out maybe the website. A lot of chains have that information listed. Most local places don't have that though. So at the end of the day, use your best judgment. It's somewhat intuitive um, to a certain extent. So even like broccoli, for example, it's great, not really any carbs, good amount of fiber. But what you're not seeing on the menu when you're reading and trying to make a good informed decision is how much butter they're putting in it, how much salt they're putting on it. So really at the end of the day, trying to limit the frequency that you're actually eating out is going to be best case scenario. Um, Generally, though, sticking to lower carbohydrate options, trying to make sure that you're getting a good protein source in there. If it's a salad, trying to throw on some chicken or shrimp or trying to get some fish. If it's an entree, obviously just trying to go for some kind of lean meat or something with legumes or, vegetarian protein option and trying to minimize the uh, amount of carbohydrates at really the amount of carbs and fats and everything that go into restaurant options are the portions are just out of control. So a good option if you are looking to splurge is maybe just right when it comes out, ask for a box up half of it, take the rest home. That way it's not sitting there in front of you when you're chatting, conversing, and just continually kind of mindlessly picking at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's a strategy I've heard before as well. The boxing up half your meal, especially if you're going to a place with large portions. It's definitely a great recommendation. Any thoughts, kind of before we move on to the next one? Any thoughts on thinking about you go out to eat with a group, picking and choosing like bread versus appetizers versus your entree versus desserts versus alcohol? Do you have any suggestions or advice there?
Yeah. I so from a strict body composition standpoint, me being the dietitian and trainer, I would say don't do appetizers. If you're gonna have a drink, there's nothing wrong with the drink. A couple drinks a week, not that big of a deal. Again, we're not like bodybuilders trying to get, sub 6% body fat. You can be totally healthy and work pretty much everything into a healthy lifestyle. It just comes down to the not sexy answer of moderation. But try to get rid of all the things that you don't really need. If that means getting rid of alcohol, but you really, really want that appetizer, that's fine. If you are really looking forward to the entree and it might be pasta or something, then get rid of the appetizer. So just trying to pick and choose what you're really excited about, and not just showing up ready to just not have a game plan and just ready to chow down.
Got it. Great advice. For those of you that don't know, I'm going to let you on a little secret. The thing that Scott is not skipping is dessert. Guy's got a sweet tooth. So he's going to pass on the appetizer. All right. But moving right along, going back to protein, Linda asked, one of the changes I am making is to eat more plant-based proteins, especially for the evening meal. Would you share some ideas for high quality plant proteins?
Yeah. Um, so soy is going to be probably at the top of the list as far as protein quality. It also generally has the most protein compared to other plant protein sources. So soy is great. Um, uh, Other things like flaxseed, legumes, even chia seeds. Chia seeds, they're so tiny, and it seems like it's one of those things that they're so little, and like, how are you ever going to get a considerable amount of protein from something that small? But every little bit adds up. Um, Quinoa, compared to rice, has a lot more protein, more fiber, just more nutritious in general. So just trying to make little substitutions. Every little bit does count.
Okay, awesome. And then that kind of answers Karen's question as well. Just looking for, are there any other protein sources in addition to meat? And she's dairy free.
Yeah, and I actually I did write down some amounts of protein per serving size, which I think may be helpful. So I mentioned soy has a lot more protein compared to other plant protein sources. You're looking at about 30 grams of protein per half cup for soybeans. That's a lot. And for reference, that's probably on par almost with like chicken breast. So that's got a lot of protein as far as plant protein sources go. Chickpeas are awesome. You're looking at about 20 grams of protein per half cup for chickpeas also. They're great. You can work those into almost any recipe too. They're very versatile. Put them in salads, almost any entree. Quinoa, I mentioned, not a ton of protein, but compared to rice, it's certainly a good option. Quinoa's got about 4 grams of protein per half cup. The chia seeds I mentioned, it's about 5 grams per ounce, which is pretty considerable. And then flax seeds, chia seeds and flax seeds both being a really good healthy fat source also. Flax seeds are about 4 grams per half cup. So not nearly as much protein as chia seeds, but they're still amazing for you. Lots of fiber. The only consideration, kind of downside with a lot of these options, is they also have a lot of carbs. Um, they're good carbs, and there's a lot of nutrients, a lot of fiber in them. But if you're kind of relying on these to be the only protein source, you just have to be careful that you're not also consuming 80 grams of carbohydrates at dinner.
Okay, so just so we understand that correctly, what you're saying is you can go more plant-based protein. However, the thing to keep an eye on is because of the increase in carbs, you're also going to drive up your total caloric intake, which is something you've just got to keep in mind. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right, good stuff. All right, next question here from Peggy, talking about gaining belly fat, and this is kind of more of a open question. What changes can I make to lose the fat?
Yeah.
So
Um,
let's go just basic. Like, where would you start? Because this is a without she didn't get too specific here. So if you're just thinking like from a nutrition standpoint, what are 2 to 3 things that you think would probably move the needle most?
yeah. Um, so we already mentioned one of them. That's just calories in versus calories out, and that's uh, not really an exciting answer either. but it's just so easy to overconsume on calories. And my recommendation there would be to try to become more aware, more mindful of what you're eating, the portion sizes you're eating, how often you're eating. So a good solution to that would be keeping a food journal, a log, maybe downloading an app like MyFitnessPal. There is a free version. They took some of the options away and you have to pay for them now. There's other various apps out there, but they're really good tools. And logging or using an app is not something I would ever expect anybody to do long term for months or years on end. But the thing it will help with is just uh, creating a better relationship with food and understanding how much you're actually eating. Um, so, in order to accurately log your nutrition or enter it into the app, you're going to have to pay attention to portion sizes, which means maybe buying a food scale. They're cheap. You can get them for like $10 on Amazon. Um, Again, it's not something that I would ever expect anybody to sit there and weigh and measure all their food forever. But if you do it for a couple of weeks, a month, you'll gain some really great insight as far as how much you're actually eating. And a lot of times it's a big eye opener. Um, the other factors to consider is just trying to move more. And that's something that I found personally from being a personal trainer for over a decade, being on the training floor nonstop all day, every day, to just training a couple of days a week. It's made a big difference. And I've noticed that I can't get away with some of the things that I used to be able to get away with. I'll be at the gym for a whole day and I'll look down at my watch and I'm getting 2,500 steps in. And I just get up and I have to move. It's like, all right, I need to start burning more calories. And so for people that are training in the gym 2 to 3 days a week, it's great. It's fantastic. Strength training really cannot be replaced. But if that's really all we're doing, is working out for an hour and then going and sitting behind a desk, it's such an uphill battle that makes it so hard. So just getting out, being more active, especially now it's beautiful outside this time of year, trying to just go for a bike ride, go for a walk, walk the dog, even setting an alarm and just standing up every hour and just getting some movement in. All those little things help.
Yeah, that's great. I touched on a lot. So with the, first couple things you mentioned, like the food journal and the portion sizes, I know not only for myself, but from talking to clients, no one wants to do that. But you're saying basically short term, just suck it up, and the education there would be so helpful. Um, I definitely agree with that. I know it was pretty depressing when I realized what a portion control of peanut butter really was. It was, it wasn't a handful. So, all right. So, measuring your portions with the food scale, keeping a food journal, definitely great short term to at least figure out what a portion sizes really are and how much your intake is. And then as far as move more, do you have any general recommendations as far as, do you suggest people should, walk every single day, most days? How would you, what advice would you give there?
It That's going to vary so widely depending on the individual. But what I would say is try to improve on what you're doing currently. So if you're currently, which is not really a fun answer, and I understand it's kind of vague, but if you're currently going to the gym 2 days a week and maybe going for one walk on another random day, just trying to add in another walk. And it can be short, it could be 15, 20 minutes, and then increasing the frequency, you know, going from 1 or 2 days a week to 3 or 4 days a week will make a big impact. You'll also hopefully notice a big impact on just how easy that becomes over time as your body adapts and gets used to it. You'll get stronger and just trying to increase the duration as well. Um, Again, the cardio, even low intensity cardio, like going for walks, it's great. It's amazing for your cardiovascular system, your heart, but strength training really can't be replaced. So if that means maybe increasing from 1 or 2 days a week in the gym to 3 days a week, that could also be a great option. Um, I don't know if this uh, was another one of the questions, but it as far as our it does relate to this question, but as far as our metabolism goes as we age, I remember back when I was in school reading research that said on average, after the age of 30, our metabolism starts to slow down about 2% a year, 1 to 2% a year, which doesn't sound all that impactful, but I mean, you compound that a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, and that's a huge decline. However, there's research in the last couple of years that shows that it's not as big of a difference as what we once thought. And really, the biggest driving factors for a decline in metabolism really is just that we stop moving as much. We don't go outside and play anymore. People get busy with careers or they retire and slow down a little bit. Um, you also have the just kind of natural loss or decline in muscle mass as we age too, which lowers your metabolism. But from really 30 to about 60, there's not a huge drop off. It's really 60 and up is when things really do start to slow down.
Thankfully, we don't have, everyone we work with is in their 30s, so that's not an issue for us. We can move on past that. But okay, so the good news is there, what you're saying is, uh, with strength training and with staying active, a lot of the decreases in metabolism can actually be offset. You're saying that from that like 30 to 60 range. Maybe not entirely, but we can do a lot to minimize that. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's hormonal changes that come into play. Men just decline testosterone. Women with perimenopause and everything. There's definitely changes that do take place. But it it used to be just kind of disheartening. It's like, well, there's nothing you can do about it. You're just in for the ride, and you're going to see this slow decline every year. But that's really not the case. There's a lot of things that you can control.
Okay, awesome. All right, kind of piggybacking on that question, because we did that kind of led right into Sarah asked about how does metabolism change after 40 and how can I keep it from slowing down? So, is there anything else to kind of dig a little deeper on that?
Strength training, really, strength training is one of the best things you can do to combat the effects of aging and trying to keep that metabolism up. When you look at the differences from uh, cardio only or like low intensity cardio walking, even running, compared to strength training, you do burn a little bit more total calories from cardio, but your metabolism shortly after goes back to kind of the baseline. However, with strength training, you really see that it kind of revs up the metabolism for many, many hours or 24 hours afterwards. So that's one of the best things you can do.
Okay. All right. Sticking on that same theme, a different question we got from Jamie. What about maintaining muscle as I age? Is there anything that needs to be done different, or do you still, does that change with age, or do you stick with your same answer about protein and strength training? So, yeah, does anything need to change to maintain muscle while aging?
Um, all the same that I said before. However, as we age, our bodies become a little bit less efficient at utilizing all the nutrients and the food that we eat, meaning that the same, let's say, 100 grams of protein that you were eating when you were 30 or 40 or 50, your body's not going to be as efficient at turning that into fuel um, if you're 60 or 70. So the older we get, the more important it is to actually increase the protein a little bit more. Um, that will also help with just combating sarcopenia or the loss in lean tissue.
Okay. All right. Great stuff. Moving right along, Dan wanted to know what role do carbs play in fat loss, and should I reduce them?
Yeah, this is a touchy one, and so there's a broad spectrum here. So there's an analogy I like to use, and it's a car analogy, but when you eat carbohydrates, no matter what the source is, if it's whole grains, lots of fiber, plant sources, or even just sugar, it all gets broken down into sugar, glucose. And so the the way that your body utilizes that is that it stores carbohydrates in your muscles, all your skeletal muscle from head to toe, and it also stores carbohydrates in your liver. And so you can kind of think of those as like a gas tank in a car. The only way you're ever going to store carbohydrates as fat, which is, I think, what people just generally think is carbs just get turned into fat, and that's all they do. But carbs play such a huge role in recovery, performance, just being able to push yourself in the gym, getting stronger. The only way that you will store those as fat is when those tanks are already full. So if you just continue to eat carbs and carbs and carbs every meal, a couple days on end, and your body, that the gas tank can't store anymore, then it gets converted over into fat. So we didn't evolve as humans just to pee out or excrete calories because we don't need them anymore. We've evolved just to continue to store it. Um, but as long as you're going in on a regular basis and uh, maintaining a good, healthy, active lifestyle, strength training, going for runs or walks, riding the bike, all that kind of stuff, you should be depleting, probably not all of it, but you should be depleting a fair amount of that gas tank. So the carbs that you eat after you work out or even throughout the day, those will not get stored as fat unless the total calories that you're consuming is just in a high surplus.
Okay.
Does that make
Yeah.
does that make sense?
Yeah. No, absolutely. All right. Down to final two questions here, and then we'll open it up to anyone that's got anything else. All right. What Mike asked, what are the most common mistakes people make with their nutrition?
Uh, I like this one too. So I think the most common mistake is just not being consistent, um, coupled with just not having a plan in general. So if the more consistency people can create and just having a good daily routine. I mean, it's almost like brushing your teeth. It just over time will become just kind of a part of your lifestyle, and you won't really have to think all that much about it. But when you go to bed at night, you should have a rough idea of what you're going to eat the next day and when you're going to eat it. Just having a plan is really half the battle. Um, the other one, just not being consistent enough. So take for example, I think what a lot of people do, Monday to Friday, they're really great. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they kind of go off the rails, even if it doesn't seem like you're binging or making like huge errors. Um, there's you can still very easily undo a few days or even a week's worth of progress, just from a bad weekend. So to kind of illustrate that, um, say for example, your baseline like maintenance level of calories just to maintain a good healthy weight's like 1800 calories or so. In order to lose weight, just take off about, let's say, 300 calories from that. So you're at about 1500 calories a day. A 300 calorie deficit times 7 days is about a pound of fat. So there's 3,500 calories in a pound of fat. Um, that's, if you're only doing that Monday through Thursday, that's 2,000 calories. That in a deficit. So 2,000 calories, not that much. You could do that in like two bad meals over the weekend. So if Friday, Saturday, Sunday are not so great, you essentially erase all the progress you did Monday through Thursday. And everybody does it. I'm not perfect. But I think a lot of people just fall into that vicious cycle. It's a trap. And every Monday is like they're hitting the reset button and they never actually break through or see any long term success from that.
Two bad meals. I can do that in like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Uh, No, that's great. I think so. Not having a plan, I liked what you said. When you go to bed, you should have a pretty decent idea what you're having the next day. I thought that was great. And then just the consistency of weekends, weekdays. That's definitely something we see a lot. Okay. Last question from Lisa. What's the best diet for fat loss?
I think similar to the last answer, the best diet for fat loss really is the one that you're going to stick with long term. Whether it be like a DASH diet, paleo, keto, you name the diet. The reason that any diet is effective is simply because people are able to get into a caloric deficit or negative energy balance, and they can just hang out there for long enough to see a change on the scale. Um, Really, again, it just kind of boils down to calories in versus calories out. So, whichever method you find the most sustainable long term is going to be the most effective. I know that's not really like a fun answer, and it's not really, the revealing anything secret or anything, but the truth of the matter is you just have to uh, just consume a little bit less calories than what you were consuming and just make it sustainable long term.
Okay, so here's a follow-up question to that. What would be the decision? What factors might you consider when thinking like, okay, well, paleo versus intermittent fasting? Like what might you want to take into consideration when I'm thinking about, well, maybe this is a good idea for me, or maybe it's not.
Yeah, I think just the foods that you like to eat will play a major factor in it. If the diet that you choose eliminates all the foods that you enjoy eating, you're going to do it for like 2 weeks. Maybe a little longer, but certainly not long enough to make a good lasting change. That's the trap again. A lot of people fall into. They'll do something for a couple of months, lose a lot of weight, feeling good, but they just cannot maintain it long term. So really, it just boils down to having a good relationship with food and enjoying things. You don't have to be perfect. Again, I'm certainly not perfect, but it as long as you keep it top of mind and make it a priority, you're going to get there. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take. Just trying to do a little bit better than what you did last week.
All right, I love it. Awesome, great answer, Scott. So to kind of recap, here are my notes. When you're getting started or wanting to make a change, measure your portions, keep a food journal to at least figure out where you're starting from. After that, you talked about the importance of protein, strength training, being consistent, have a plan, and then just move more in general. Uh, Scott, thanks so much. What question? Do you guys have any other questions that you like? All right, I'm opening up the chat here. Is there an optimal meal or foods to consume after a workout? That's a great question.
Yeah. And I uh, maybe should have hit on this when we were talking about carbohydrates too. So after you work out, your body's in a state where it's really craving nutrients, and you're essentially just broken down a bunch of muscle tissue and you need to repair it. Probably the worst thing you can do is just go on about your day, get ready for work, and just not have anything. Ideally, though, what you're kind of looking for is about 20 grams of protein, maybe a little more, and also some carbs. So we kind of hit on carbs earlier. Um, when you're strength training, playing sports, any kind of like higher intensity activity, carbohydrates are going to be the primary fuel source that your body likes to use for all those activities. So the carbohydrates you eat after you work out are really not going to get stored as fat as long as you're not just going totally crazy and eating a whole pizza or anything. Um, but ideally, what you're looking for is about 20 or so grams of protein and 30 to 40 grams of carbs for most people. Um, People that have a lot more muscle mass can certainly get away with consuming a lot more carbohydrates. They have, again, that gas tank in the car. They have a much, much bigger gas tank. And so they can afford and they probably should have a little more. But a little over 20 grams of protein and 30, 40, maybe 50 grams of carbs.
Okay, to follow that, two follow-up questions. One, because you're saying that the carbs are less likely to be stored as fat, if you had a sweet tooth, would that be the optimal timing to have that delicious treat?
It would, as long as it's lower in fat. So anything with fat and fiber, it just takes so much longer to digest, which is great if you're trying to lose weight. Good healthy fat sources and good high fiber sources are going to be your best friend because they're going to make you feel fuller longer. They generally, you just get a lot more food out of it compared to things like refined sugars. You're going to eat those and you're going to be hungry like an hour later. But after you work out, if you did want something sweet, go for it. That's the time to eat it. That's the time that your body's really looking to take those carbohydrates and use them in a productive manner.
Okay. So assuming we're not talking about having cheesecake right after you work out for that carb source, what is the preferred, what would you recommend as far as a preferred source of carbs post workout?
Yeah. Um, so and this is kind of strictly talking about maintaining weight or um, losing weight, athletes and stuff like that are kind of different. But generally, so let's take breakfast, for example. If you go to the gym in the morning, 6:30, 7:30 a.m., and then you come home or go out to eat, um, eggs, so protein source, or it could be Greek yogurt or anything with about 20 or so grams of protein, um, coupled with almost anything. That could be like oatmeal, it could be toast, it could be some fruit, yogurt, um, anything that is going to provide about 30 or 40 grams of carbohydrates. The source there really does not matter all that much as long as it's going to fill you up for a few hours and you're not going to be hungry and ready to go, an hour later, essentially. But the source can be almost anything after you work out, as long as it looks like real food. Generally, if you can kill it or grow it, it's probably okay.
Okay. All right. Sticking to that theme, does it matter at all working out morning versus evening? Does the timing of your workout is that going to play any impact on your post-workout nutrition?
Not really. So I know, uh, for example, I've had several questions with people that work out in the evening, and they're like, "Well, I've heard that I shouldn't really eat after 8 p.m. or whatever." Um, Eat. Go ahead and eat. Eating within an hour after your workout is one of the best things you can do just to jumpstart the recovery process and make sure that you're ready to go for the next day, essentially. Even if you're, let's say, training, we're not open that late, but if you were training at 9 p.m., I would still eat before you go to bed. Don't go to bed on an empty stomach if you just worked out.
All right. What about before a workout? What would you recommend eating?
So before your workout, the goal is just to make sure that you have enough energy to get you through the workout and to be able to push yourself hard. Um, Take, for example, somebody who works out at 5:30 in the morning. A lot of people just roll out of bed and don't really give it thought. They're like, well, I'll just eat later, even when I'm done with my workout. Some people can get away with that for sure, and there's no issue. But there is kind of a broad spectrum on how people perform during the workouts on an empty stomach. So some people are totally fine. Other people, and I've seen it a lot, they 20 minutes into the workout start getting pale, cold sweats, you sit down for a minute, maybe get a little dizzy or nauseous. Um, if you're one of those people, just try to avoid that. So the best way that you can do that is 20, 30 grams of carbohydrates, maybe 60 to 30 minutes before, depending on what it is. Anything, again, that has a higher amount of fat or fiber in it is just going to take a lot longer to break down and digest and essentially elevate the blood sugar in that fasted state. Something like fruit, banana, yogurt, stuff like that, it's going to happen a lot quicker. So if you're going to have a banana, you could get away with it, 45 minutes or so, 30 minutes before your workout and be totally fine. But again, the goal is just to make sure that you're able to push yourself and you're not just working out in a fasted state.
Okay. All right. So you're saying it does depend the pre-workout definitely meal definitely depends a little bit more. Some people would be fine on an empty stomach, a lot wouldn't. And you've got to take that into account. Correct?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Just trying to
Perfect.
learn where you lie on that spectrum is really important. Trying to pick up on trends. If you ever do experience nauseousness or anything when you're working out, maybe just try increasing the carbohydrates a little bit more, adding another piece of fruit, another piece of toast, maybe an hour before you come into the gym could be a really good solution. Protein
Okay.
before you work out is definitely important, but it's much more important after you work out.
Got it. Okay. All right. And then Mary, you're talking about RMR, resting metabolic rate. Is that correct? Okay. All right. Scott, how accurate is resting metabolic rate analysis?
Yeah. So like the on our in-body machines, that's one of the numbers that it will show you on the printout. Um, I think they're fairly accurate. The thing you have to take into consideration though is it doesn't account for any activity. The activity level's going to vary a huge amount from person to person. Um, Even if they're going through the same workout, just depending on how much muscle mass you have, how active you are throughout the day. Again, just getting up, moving around, fidgeting throughout the day, going for a walk later in the day. Um, so if let's say, for example, you see 1,500 calories on your RMR on the printout, um, for somebody who's fairly sedentary and sits behind the desk, uh, 8, 10 hours a day, and they're not really getting a whole lot of activity, we're only talking about tacking on a couple hundred calories from that. Um, However, if it's, let's say, like a waitress or somebody that has a really high demanding job and they're on their feet all day long and they work out, you could essentially double that number. So it's huge. But that again is why I like the method of keeping a food journal, um, or logging your nutrition in an app like MyFitnessPal, and then just hopping on the InBody of the scale a little more regularly so that you can try to pick up on uh, trends and what do I need to do to essentially make the scale move a little bit quicker.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Got, I think one or two more. All right. Tracking using MyFitnessPal. What should the macro goals be? Or is that something, you would look at?
Yeah. Um, so again, the most important thing is the calories in versus calories out. You can still lose weight, um, even if the macros are completely out of whack and not anywhere remotely what they should be. If you're still in a negative energy balance, so if you're burning more than you're consuming, you're going to lose weight. Plain and simple. Um, However, the important thing to think about there is we don't want to lose a whole bunch of muscle mass along with the fat. Anytime you lose weight, you're going to be sacrificing a little bit of lean mass. There's not really a whole lot you can do about that other than increasing your protein and strength training. Definitely, both those things definitely help. But once you have established that your calories are in check, protein really is the next highest priority. Again, anywhere from, let's say up to a gram per pound of body weight or that 2 grams per kilo, somewhere in that range, would be kind of on the upper end. Then carbohydrates, since they play such a big role in performance, recovery, they should be kind of that next tier. Um, but honestly, if the calories are in check, you're getting enough protein, the fats and the carbs don't really play a huge role. They are important, but you can get away with doing whatever essentially for those. As long as you're getting carbohydrates after you work out, it does not have to be that detailed.
Okay, yeah, great answer. Last, I got one more question for you. How do you feel about timed eating for people over 70?
Feel about what? Sorry.
How do you feel about timed eating for people over 70?
In timed eating, meaning,
Mary, you want to chat? Sorry to put you on the spot. Why don't you unmute yourself and elaborate?
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Mhm.
Um, I was because for a long time I was not eating breakfast. I would just eat between like 11 and 6. But as I got older, that seemed to be a little harder and was told that maybe at your age you shouldn't do that anymore. But it felt good. It seemed to work for me. So I've been thinking about trying to get into that again, and I didn't know whether that was bad thinking or what your thoughts were on it.
No, in a perfect world, the meals would be kind of evenly spaced. Nobody's perfect. So if you are able to, if that's just kind of your lifestyle and that's just what works for you, I think you can be totally successful doing that. Is it basically just shortens the window of opportunity for protein intake. So
Even not eating before workout, because I usually work out about 9 o'clock.
yeah, I think as long as you are not having symptoms like that, low blood sugar symptoms, getting dizzy, all that kind of stuff, I think you can do it and be totally fine as long as you're seeing results. That's the important thing. If you were not seeing results and you were doing that, I might switch things up a little bit. But the only downside, really, the only two downsides to that are one, again, making sure that you're not having symptoms during the workout. Um, Two, it if that leaves you with like, let's say, 2 meals a day, that's the those meals are going to have to be really, really, really high in protein to make sure that you're getting enough protein. Whereas if you're having more eating occurrences throughout the day, it's just a lot easier. There's more chances at getting protein sources since protein is so important. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Mhm.
But I think if you are seeing results and you are getting enough protein, I think there's no issue with that.
Okay, and if I could clarify my question about the RMR metabolic analysis,
Mhm.
it is sitting in a chair with a mask on your face and it analyzes from your breath, how many calories your body is using, and it's supposed to tell you the amount of carbs and fats and protein. So I just was wondering if that was legit or
I think so. I think. Where did you have it done?
well, I get it done tomorrow morning. So
Okay,
I haven't had I don't have the results yet, but I go to Dexafit in Town and Country and get it done there.
got it, got it. Yeah, we've got some members who have gone there as well. I've actually seen somebody has brought their report in, and we compared it against the InBody. And there was a couple of months in between, so a lot of things change. Um, but I think it's really accurate, and
Cool.
they were pretty on par. There were some differences, but again, there was some time in between.
Mhm. Great, great. Thank you.
All right, Scott, one more bonus question for you. All right, what's your favorite quick and easy protein sources?
I actually so protein bars are a lifesaver for me. Just constantly being on the go, having kids. My I don't eat as many home cooked meals as I used to. Protein bars, protein shakes are fantastic. What you should look for if you're going to eat those, because they are so convenient, you don't have to cook them. You don't have to refrigerate them. You can throw them in a purse, throw them in a bag, put them in your pocket. They're great. Um, what you're looking for, though, is like at least 15 grams of protein. Some have 20, 25. but then also check out the fat content, saturated fat content, and the sugar. There's a lot of protein bars out there now that taste like candy bars, and it's because they have a lot of sugar and they have a lot of fat in them. So making sure that it's got, let's say, less than like 5 grams of saturated fat will be a kind of a good rule of thumb. And then most of them are relatively low in sugar, but that's because they add sugar alcohols and they don't get counted towards sugar. But again, low in fat, at least 15 to 20 grams. I actually randomly had these. These are an awesome protein snack. I don't know if you guys can see these. Um, See if it focus. They're bada bean, bada boom. They are essentially just beans, but they're crunchy. Again, you don't have to refrigerate them. You can throw them in a bag. Um, they're great. You can get them on Amazon. There's 6 grams of protein, which is equivalent to about 1 ounce of meat. Um, at the end of the day, it's not a ton of protein, but as far as snacks go, there's almost no sugar. The fat is all healthy fat, and it's got protein in it, which you know can't be said for chips and other things like that. Um, Greek yogurt also really convenient. The little single serving things, again, you can pack those in a lunch. Um, Cottage cheese. I do enjoy cottage cheese, but I'm not one of the hardcore cottage cheese fans. But there are a lot of recipes that make it really easy to incorporate it into almost anything.
All right. Well, there you go, Jennifer. All right. Well, to wrap this up, thank you all so much. Hopefully, everyone got at least like one or two good nuggets out of it that you can take and move forward. Just as a reminder, we will be doing this again on Monday, March 24th at 6 p.m. We'll have a whole new list of questions. I'll send out you guys will all get this recording. I will send out a reminder about the next one. I'll also send out a link. If you do want to submit questions in advance, you're more than welcome to. You don't have to, but yeah, we're here to help. And like I said, we just want to provide more value and help everyone see better results. So thank you all so much for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.